Okay, back again. This is marble. All right, so we'll start from the beginning. So get your scale out and turn it on to grams. Put your mother culture container on and zero it, so bring it back to 0. So this is the mother culture that's been fed with 300 grams of flour and 300 mils of warm water overnight, and she's just festered away. So all you're going to do is put 250 grams in here. And remember, it's not an exact science. If you put 260 in, big deal. Nobody's going to lose any sleep over that. So having said that, I've put 297 in, which is probably a bit too much. So I'm just going to chuck just a bit back in there. And that's 280. I'm happy with that. So lid goes on that. All right, simple as that. And she's going back in the fridge. So she'll stay in the fridge until I'm ready to use her next time. Okay, so zero your scales again. And remember I said that these two are kind of the same weight. So put one on and zero it. So then I'm just going to try and divide it as easy, as close as I can between the two. So I know from experience that having what I fed her with last night is going to give me about 280 grams into each, but I'll start with 270. Says me. Oh yeah, there's 230. There's 264. So take that off, bring that one on, zero it. All right, there's 261. So there's just sort of a little bit left in that, so I'll scrape some of this, might even it out a little bit. And look, that's as scientific as it gets. It's not an exact science. Don't lose any sleep over it. But divide them sort of as evenly as you can between the two. Now, I'm actually going to use some of those pre-bagged that were in the... So these come in 4 600 gram bags, which is good because I use 600 grams in each of the bread. So I'm going to use a white one and I'm going to use a whole grain one or a multi-grain one, just so you can see the difference in how they knead up and how they end up in the baking tray, because they're a little bit different, because this is clearly more dense than this one. So under normal circumstances, I would put my culture there, zero the scales and weigh in 600 grams of flour, but I don't have to do that because it's pre-done for me. So 600 grams of the white, .600 grams of the multigrain, okay, and the next most important thing is a really good sort of handful of sugar. Salt, not sugar. So again, not an exact science. All right, but you have to put salt in it. All right. So next thing, get bread bakers together. So just spray all around it. Okay. Now, I'll do the white first. So I've got some flour just on standby, just some plain white flour. Now, if you're using multigrain and you don't have any multigrain, and you always need a little bit of extra flour, don't stress if it's white, doesn't matter. So when I'm making my multigrain, I'm actually going to be having a little pile of white flour here, and you'll see why. All right, so I've got my mother culture, my flour, my salt, zero my scales, and I turn it to mils. Okay, then I turn the hot water tap on, and in the bowl that the mother culture was in, I'm going to put hot water in that, and I'm going to mix in sort of whatever's left. Alright, so pop your hot water in there and just sort of mix in the leftover culture that's in there, just because you can. Alright, so into your batter, into your mixture, you put into the white flour 270 mils of warm flour. Why warm? Because the mother culture works with heat rather than cold. You don't want to turn her off, you want to turn her on. All right, so that's 264 grams. Am I going to worry about it? Prob's not, but I'm going to put some water in here just in case I need to add some more, just as a standby. All right, so what I do now is just put a little bit of water, flour just along here, just as a bit of a working station. Can you see that? So just on the side there. Okay. And then what you do is start. So you just start working her in, just working it all together. You've obviously washed your hands. And don't wear long sleeves because, as you'll see later, I use all of my arms, my hands and my arms. So all you're doing is just working it in together, all right? And it's a very intuitive, tactile kind of thing. So you'll start to know, the more you make, the more you'll know how it feels. So this feels kind of okay to me. And I'm actually using my thumb to sort of scrape around the bottom like a mix master. It could probably do with just, and if you're going to add any more water, be really careful. Just add a couple of mils because water's a bit of a kicker in this. So you can see it all start to come together. So take it out, scrape out what's left. This is where my letter opener comes in. So then I just scrape everything off my hands. Because your hands need to be pretty clean, like pretty free of this stuff, in order to knead it properly. Okay, then get whatever's in there out. Okay. All right. So the trick now is to get rid of all of this stuff on your hand. So stick your hand in here and the other hand in here and just rub it clean. all right? And then you can just start. Just keep a little bit of flour on your hands. It makes it easier to knead. And then you just start. So I'm literally standing with my legs apart and moving as I do it. It's actually very therapeutic. If it starts to stick to your hand, just a little bit more flour. And if you've added too much water and it's sticky, you can just incorporate as you go along with this. So however you want to do it, I have a kind of a washing machine method. And as my hands start to stick, you just add a little bit more flour to it. So I'm heavy-handed, like I'm pushing really hard on this. So I'm pushing down and bringing it back in and pushing it down and bringing back in. And you can start to feel it change underneath your hands, which is the best bit about it. And you just keep kneading until it starts to change. And then what I do then is move some of that flour across there. And then this is when I was saying, so I'm now going backwards and forwards. This is where I use all of my arms as a big rolling pin. And I've got enough flour, I don't want to have any more, so just get rid of some of that off the side, because I actually don't want to incorporate any more. Bring it back in. And I use my thumbs a lot, just to try and break it up. So you'll develop your own style of how you want to knead and all of that sort of stuff. You can dance while you do it. So the $1 million question is, when do you stop? And my answer to that is, I don't know. Just when you kind of feel like it's done enough. I don't think you can over knead it. The other thing is that a lot of people, most people, when they make bread, they would put it back in these bowls and let it rise again and then punch it down and re-knead it. I never do that. I only ever knead once. And maybe that's because of my mother culture. I don't know. But most of the instructions on the packets will tell you to knead it twice. And I don't. So if you want to knead twice, go for your life. It's not an exact science. I find that the mother culture, so I'll often just pull it out, just work a little bit harder with it. I think this breaks the gluten up. I'm not sure. But, you know, so I'm going to say, because it gets a bit kind of shiny and feels different under your hands. So what I do then is just roll it out. Okay, then I fold her in. Then I just drop her like that in there. Okay, there's another little sort of step to go after that, but I'll do that when I do the wholemeal one. So same deal, put it on, Dander Mills, hot water. Now, the wholemeal tends to be a bit drier, so, or a bit more dense. So I'm going to make sure I have 280 mils in that. I don't want to suggest that if you make an error to add more water rather than less, but you can fix more water, all right, by adding more flour. All right, so that's 286 mils. I'm just going to add a bit more. I'll do this one. All right, so same deal, hands in. I actually really like the wholemeal or multigrain. It's multigrain, not wholemeal. And different flours will react differently, and that's you know, understandable. It's probably better to start with white, just so you can get a feel of an uncomplicated, you know, a sense of how an uncomplicated loaf of bread feels under your fingers, how the flour feels under your fingers with the mother culture. And, you know, I'm always using my thumb, sort of scraping the bottom of it and bringing it in, and scraping the bottom of it and bringing it in. So when you can hold it in a ball, get it out. Get your paper thing from Tasmania. I mean, you can use a bread and butter knife. You can use anything. So just try and get as much off as you can. Just makes it easier with the next step. Get whatever you can in the bowl. Okay, both hands in the flour. And then just clean it off. Okay, flour your hands up and then just and if it's, you know, if you start and you feel like, oh no, there's too much water in it, just immediately start to incorporate the flour that you've got on the side. You can always add more flour to it as you go along. And when your hands get sticky, same thing. It gets sticky because the flour's too wet. So just by adding a bit more on your hands is only going to solve the problem. And then just continue to incorporate. I still think that's a bit wet because you can feel it under your hands and your hands stick to it. But, you know, don't add sort of big whopping amounts to it to fix it. They're small amounts. Just titrate by small amounts. And if it's just a matter of, like, you don't want it to be any thicker, but you just want your hands to stop sticking, just keep applying the flour to your kneading hand. So you can already feel it start to change its nature. So it might look a lot, but these are just little increments of flour. So like just dustings amount. So the marble, you know, look, in an ideal world, I'd have a piece of marble that's twice this size. But it just makes it easier to work with. So put oomph into it. We're actually being cruel to be kind. So I'm literally up on, you know, tiptoes, going up and down like this just to put weight behind it. And I use my thumbs to sort of separate it in the middle and bring her out a little bit and then work her back in. So now you can see I don't need any flour. So it's the right consistency. I mean, I might put a dusting on just to, you know, because I can. But I really don't need anything else to work with that. One last time. Fold her in. Just dump her in there. So they're both there now, right? Then I've got this that's got a filter on top, a sieve, not a filter. There's just plain white flour in there. So all I'm going to do is that. And that's to stop it crusting over on the top. If you want crusty bread, you can spray it with flour, okay? So now they're going to sit on my bench top. What's the time now? 11 o'clock in the morning. Depending on how she goes, actually I'll check in with you, but I imagine that it'll be 8 o'clock at night before I bake. And that's because it's cold today. So it's going to take a long time for her to do her stuff and grow and ferment and all of that. If it was summer, I would put them both out into our outside area and cover it so that flies couldn't get on it. So put a netting over it that didn't touch the top. And I'd be baking in 3 hours. So I will get back in touch when I'm ready to bake it, and then we'll go through the next stage. So I hope all of that makes sense, and I will send you some mother culture soon. See ya.